Hey guys, what's going on? John here from What's Spinning, here tonight to chat about this new Holly Herndon album, PROTO. Holly Herndon is a San Francisco-based experimental artist, and I know that she had a couple of weird, interesting early EPs and projects, but it wasn't until around the time of her Movement album that I really got on board with some of her stuff. This was a pretty interesting experimental pop album that brought in elements of like techno and glitch pop. I'd say it's more fascinating of an album than anything, and like there's some really great ideas here, but there's also a lot that I feel like should have been fleshed out a little bit more, as well as some that should have been left on the shelf entirely. On the other hand, her Platform album that came out a couple of years back, really interesting album. This is an album that's just as quirky, just as bizarre, just as strange, like that whole Greek yogurt thing. I still haven't completely wrapped my head around that. But it's also strangely more accessible in parts, and I kind of always appreciated that. Now, these new singles from Holly have been a little all over the place. They've ranged from kind of obnoxious and annoying to literally some of the best stuff that she's ever put out. Let's chat about this thing. Like I said, when chatting about some of the singles, a lot of this album is some of the best stuff that Holly has put out, period. Take, for example, the Alienation single. To a T, I feel like this is the sound that Holly should be going for. I love the absolutely massive, in-your-face production here. It's just so unforgiving and brutal, but strangely beautiful deep down. It also has an almost progressive feel to it, like this track has layer after layer that I just want to dive into all of it. The synths are super heavy, and the vocals are strangely heavenly amongst this very crushing atmosphere. Honestly, I think this is a freaking awesome tune. Then we have the first of two live training tracks, the first one being Canaan. And let me tell you, this track is the exact opposite. I love the very stripped down chamber pop sound. It's actually pretty incredible. Vocals all around are so unbelievably chilling. Like, as an interlude, this is incredibly effective. Like, no matter how beautiful this track is, it has a way of getting under your skin, and I love that. Then we have tracks like Frontier, which is just magnificently strange. It's a completely bizarre tune that comes very well equipped with some strong chanting, but it ends up coming off triumphant and like glorious. It's one of the more stripped down tracks here, but here it actually works because it puts all of your focus on this chanting and this chorus or whatever you want to call it. So much so that when that beat hits, like I don't know what I was expecting, but this ends up being one of the more exciting tunes here. The pounding drums, the tribal feel, like Holly Herndon sounds absolutely dangerous in this environment. Once again, this right here is where I want to hear Holly. And fear, uncertainty, doubt is just the sort of otherworldly pop that I feel like Holly pulls off so wonderful. This is one of the most synthetic sounding tracks of the bunch, and if you listen to the album, you know that's saying something. But I really can't help but just to sit back and just be totally stunned by these vocals here. It's whimsical and it's just a wonderful sound. And Swim has this very regal sense to it that I did not expect to hear at all. Once again, it comes off like a pop tune from like another realm of existence. It's pensive and beautiful, but it's also incredibly hard to pinpoint. Ironically, I feel like this is one of the more accessible tunes here. So much so that I feel like some Holly Herndon enthusiasts might not be into this track. But for me, this bridges just so many gaps and makes me happy. But there are also a great deal of tracks here that's a little bit too much of a stretch. Take, for example, Birth, this album's opener. It's a very stark intro that certainly puts you on notice. Like, there's certainly an urgency to this, and the very icy feel actually gets you in the mood to listen to the rest of this album. But I don't know, this track really isn't too stunning overall. It could have been a whole lot more interesting. I'm not really that fascinated by Eternal. It's still a very massive track, but weirdly enough, this track doesn't come off nearly as organic. I feel like some of the sampling that Holly pulls up here is a little underwhelming. And while, yes, it's certainly catchy, I feel like Holly's almost taking a step back on this one. However, I don't think it's all bad. It's still a pretty stunning example of what Holly can do. I just feel it's a little underwhelming. But then we get moments like Extreme Love, and I don't know, man, I'm just not into this. It's not like Holly in these moments has forgotten how to get under people's skin and make them feel uncomfortable. Trust me, she hasn't. I mean, I'm into some pretty weird spoken word stuff sometimes, but this is just a little too out there for my liking. Like, I get this track. I get what she was going for, just not into it. The second live training track, Evening Shades, not nearly as into this one. Like, it's not a good track, and it's not nearly as beautiful as its sister track. But in a weird way, it still does stop you, it still makes you think. Like, even when I'm not into this track, Holly really makes you just, like, pause and think about what you're listening to and what it is that's coming through your speakers. That's interesting, even if it's not your cup of tea. And Bridge, to me, is just a little too desperate to be anything special. I feel like this track here just isn't coming to Holly nearly as easily as I hoped it would. As a matter of fact, I feel like here she's just trying to be weird at any cost and not trying to make any statement or anything. And we have a few tracks here which you kind of really have to sit with for better and for worse. Take, for example, Crawler, which actually excited me at first because we just saw Holly diving headfirst into this atmosphere, building it up. That's what I want to hear. I love how murky this track is, and it's actually legitimately hard to place. Like, this track sounds like a pop song, but it's like multiple dimensions away, and we're just getting tons and tons of feedback. That's cool. It's a freaky tune, and it just shows how genuinely fearless Holly is. Like, it's far from the easiest to digest here, and honestly, I think it goes on for, like, far too long. But if this is where we are right now, I'm not too pissed about it. But then we get tracks like Godmother, which was released as a single late last year, and ever since I've heard it, I don't get it. Like, as a matter of fact, I think it's like the worst track here almost. I really just don't get where it's supposed to be going. There has been some amazingly beautiful and most importantly creative material on this album. But this track just kind of throws it all away for just some shock value and ends up just giving me a headache. But Last Gasp is actually a very meditative and interesting finale that really makes you think. When Holly really sits with some of these sounds and like builds up on them over time, she creates some pretty amazing atmospheres. These vocals that we get here, like, these actually might be the best ones on the album. Like, it's so mysterious and chilly once again, but like, it's also incredibly beautiful. This is a great sound for Holly. And most importantly, it sums up a lot of the ideas that the rest of this album had without repeating anything. So, in conclusion, I feel like Proto is an album of two very big extremes. I feel like, in some parts, this is Holly's most accessible, catchy, and beautiful album to date. And it's actually pretty creative and beautiful and stunning. And it's actually pretty creative and breathtaking. But at the same time, this also contains a lot of Holly's ugliest and most perplexing work to date, so much so that it does weigh this album down a little bit. So for me, I'm feeling like a light 7 on this album, but let me know what you guys think down below. If you liked the video, be sure to give us a like, give us a subscribe, and let me know down below what you guys would like for me to chat about in the future. And until next time, have a great day, guys.